Welcome. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is McGee. I am a director of data science, agile delivery at HCA Healthcare. Uh, I am part of the digital transformation and innovation group there. So our goal is to use emerging technology, AI tooling to really make a step change in the way healthcare is delivered at HCA. Yes.
Could you speak louder?
Yes, I can. So because of the size that we are at HCA, if we make a change in how healthcare is delivered at HCA, we will change how healthcare is delivered in this country. And let's face it, this country could use better healthcare. So, just some background about me. My undergrad is in math and economics. I'm also a fully credentialed actuary. I've been in consulting for more than 15 years. I've worked primarily in highly regulated industries like healthcare and financial services, and for firms like not only HCA, but Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Pfizer, Citibank, FINRA, TIA, Wells Fargo. Well, lots of different experiences over the years. But today, what I'm here to talk to you about is our nurse handoff solution and how we have deployed that to production. I would love to make this a conversation. So if you have questions, feel free, raise your hand, shout them out, and Sam, if you can provide them on Zoom, that'd be great. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm just gonna set the stage for you of what we're dealing with at HCA. So we operate at incredible scale. We provide healthcare at over 190 hospitals and over 2,500 different sites of care across both the United States and the UK. So this translates into thousands of clinicians that are coordinating care for more than 44 million patient encounters every single year. So at this scale, even small inefficiencies become massive system-wide problems. And one of the most critical and fragile moments in that care delivery is nurse handoff. So this is when the accountability for a patient transfers from one nurse to another nurse, usually at the end of a shift. And at HCA, this occurs approximately 80,000 times across the entire enterprise every single day. So today, this process depends heavily on the individual experience of the nurses that are involved. So nurses have to search through the patient chart. So I'm showing you an example of what a chart looks like from one of the different medical record systems that we use at HCA. They have to go through this chart. They have to intake a tremendous amount of raw data, mentally synthesize all of this from a constantly changing record. Updates are coming in all the time. They have to create a concise and accurate story to relate to the next nurse that is coming in from their shift at the end of a 12-hour day. So imagine if you are working and you are working a 12-hour day, and at the end of your day, you have to summarize these 6 different projects that you were working on all day. You have to hand that off to somebody, and you get 5 minutes to do that 6 times in a row at the end of 12 hours. Like, that's just a tremendous mental burden. Okay, so the risk of this cognitive overload and the inconsistent communication really has a lot of high stakes. So these communication failures are the leading cause of sentinel events in healthcare. And many of these sentinel events occur because of handoff. So this is, yes. So a sentinel event is an event that occurs in healthcare that involves a patient injury or even death. Yes.
What you're saying is the system is not taking the data that is input on a daily basis and then summarizing it like in an executive summary for the nurse to just hand off quickly if it nurse coming on your desk.
Right. So in current state, there is no summary that's given. The nurses just literally meet in the hallway and talk to each other about, like, this is what I did, this is what's going on. They may jot down notes. They may go and look in the medical record, but I showed you what the medical record looked like. That's a lot of stuff to parse through and try to figure out. And a med-surg nurse has 6 patients usually at a time.
supposed to replace like the S bar as
Ooh, that is a great question. So he asked if this is supposed to replace the S bar. This actually is very similar to an S bar, and we're going to be using an S bar format, and I'll talk about that and show you here in a second. Yes. So ultimately, that's why AI is a great tool here, because we can standardize, we can augment this handoff process so that we can make sure every nurse is starting with the same set of information. We can synthesize that, summarize it for them. I can fix. Okay, Sam, did that work on the Zoom?
Can you see this, Sam?
Did I advance slides for you?
Yeah, AI-powered handoff agent.
Love it. Okay, just making sure that we're still working. Okay.
No, thank you.
So in order to solve this, what we did is we built an agentic system specifically to facilitate this workflow. So what we're doing is providing real-time summaries of each patient's distinct and critical information, taking all of that data that you saw, extracting, summarizing, surfacing intelligently all the individual facts that are needed about each and every patient. So the app displays this information on a nurse's phone, like literally in the palm of their hand, and it's organized in that SBAR format. So situation, background, assessment, recommendations. This was built by nurses for nurses, so we have their input the entire way as we have been developing this, and I'll talk more about how we incorporated their feedback as we go. Yes?
What's the platform behind the agent? Is it, I mean, obviously, end of the day, you have front end that is obviously, which you just showed, like, the information. Like, what is the platform that goes with the agent?
So we are running on GCP. So we have GKE running in the background. So ultimately, success is dependent on getting nurses to actually trust the information that we're presenting to them. So we do a few things to make this work. First, we include citations back to the source so that nurses can trust and verify every single thing that we're providing to them. We also have 2 feedback systems that we use, one of which is a human-in-the-loop feedback, which is what you're seeing on the screen here, where the nurses can provide feedback in several ways. Either they can click on one of those little flags that you see in the corner and provide their comment, something's wrong, something's missing, they want to alert us to something. Or they can also click on the survey that occurs at the bottom to say, like, was this a good experience? You've all seen the thumbs up, thumbs down stuff everywhere. Same kind of concept, where if they give us a thumbs down, we ask them more specifically, what exactly is the problem with this handoff? The second way that we give feedback is through an evaluation loop using LLMs as judges to review that generated content. So we're pairing both of those together to make sure that this is always safe and reliable in a clinical setting. How's the LLM assessment incorporated? Good question. So we review the LLM assessment on a few different metrics, and I'm actually going to go much more in depth on that in a little bit. So when I get to that, if I don't answer your question, ask me again. All right. So I've given you the overview, but how did we actually build this? Like, what are we actually doing under the hood? So we leaned into an agentic approach here on purpose, but we focused on control, not autonomy. I think a lot of what you hear out in just the broader media about agents is about autonomy and agents running amok, doing all sorts of things, making reservations, getting Bitcoin, whatever. We're not doing that. This is the opposite of that, in that we are trying to get a very controlled system in place. But in order to do that, we needed tooling. And so we integrated ADK, which is the Agent Development Kit, which is an open source tool from Google. So again, we are on the Google platforms. Everything that you see here is going to be Google related because we are very much on board with Google at HCA. So what we get out of that is that we can control the inputs and the outputs for our agents, and we can structure everything in a very hierarchical, organized way. So ADK gives us open telemetry. It gives us logs, metrics, traces, so that we can improve our observability of what we are doing with our agents basically for free by integrating this tool into our platform. And so as we get more complex, as we add more and more to the system, which I'll show you what we've added over time, this gives us a standard template for integrations for plugging tools in to be able to manage all of that complexity in a way that is still standardized and not a super bespoke system that no one's ever going to be able to debug later. Okay, so big picture, what do we have here? Our POC started with one large, dare I say, unpredictable prompt that ingested all of the patient's data all at once into context and generated one summary. So it was one LLM call, lots of data in, a whole bunch of processing by that LLM, and one big output. That works for POC purposes, but we needed to put this into production, and frankly, that didn't scale. So what did we do? We decomposed that big mega prompt into smaller targeted tasks that are going to be handled by this hierarchy of agents. And at the highest level, we have 3 sequential agents that are managing this process. Data preparation, the parallel agents that are going to generate all the individual components of that summary. So what I showed you in the beginning, what all that looked like. And then the final piece that combines everything together, gives us the output in the format that we need, keeps everything in the right format, makes sure that the JSON that we're outputting is actually good, valid JSON.
This feels like old school MapReduce.
Oh, I mean, a little bit, yeah. It's kind of a similar concept. He asked if this was similar to MapReduce. Okay. So why did we do this, and why did we go with agents as we wanted to scale? So as we broke down this mega prompt into smaller, more focused prompts, that allowed us to first move from our Gemini Pro models, which were quite expensive, to Gemini Flash models. They were much cheaper. This allowed us to really reduce the amount of input tokens that we were making for every individual call. It reduced the amount of output tokens that were coming out for every single call. You pay by the token. And we're also able to take advantage of caching. So for some of that patient context that you're going to want in every single one of these calls, we can cache that. It allowed us to make changes to one section of the summary without inadvertently affecting other sections of the summary. So with one large mega prompt, I make a change. I want to change something about how the admission information is being displayed. Because I've got one prompt and one output, I may inadvertently change the diagnostic results section just because of how it's all going together into one big black box, basically. So by making these into smaller pieces, I can adjust the prompts, I can adjust the input data into each one of these sections and fine-tune pieces and really address any of the feedback that we're getting from the nurses. We can also use this to make specialized agents. So because we're able to then zoom in on one particular piece of that summary, we can make an agent that's specific for the diagnosis. We can make an agent that's specific for diagnostic imaging results. We can make something for the additional notes section. And then those pieces become modular and can be reused within other handoff workflows that we want to build, or even by other teams. By reducing the amount of context that we have in every individual agent call and every LLM prompt, that also meant that we reduced the amount of hallucinations. So when we're not giving the LLM this huge context and then having it try to fill out this entire section, but we're much more focused, it does a much better job of not wandering off and filling in details that we don't want it to. So that really helped us with that control. Yes? So He was asking if each agent is optimized for the model. And so, yes, we have optimized our prompts for the models that we are using. And then those prompts are also then, of course, optimized for our individual use case, whatever the particular piece is. But yes, so as we have changed models, we have had to also change the prompts. Yes. 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 So I kind of skipped over the data processing agent piece of it because it is uh, there's more there. There's a lot of detail. Basically, with our data side of it, we've got data coming in from all sorts of different sources across the enterprise. We have all of the EMRs at HCA, which makes getting consistent data that has been standardized and normalized very challenging. So one of the ways that we use agents on the data processing side is to comb through all the different types of data that we have from different EMRs and then even customizations for each facility to be able to go in and try to extract out the different concepts that we're looking for. So that gets very into the details on how we're accessing the data from each individual EMR. And we are currently only using 2 of them. We're doing 2 of them, but we have several more to do. But that is how we're doing it on the data side. Yeah. So in the current state, the data, we pull the data fresh when we are going to run a summary. Because the handoffs occur primarily at shift change, this all happens at approximately 6:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every day local time. There are some handoffs that occur off cycle. So you can have handoffs that occur in the middle of the day. You have someone who just shows up in a med-surg unit from another floor. They just got admitted, other things. And then those are done ad hoc. And we produce those at that moment. It takes around 2 to 3 minutes for a handoff to be generated at this point. Yeah. Yes.
What are your decision criteria for determining if you need to keep with a high-end model or you can use a cheaper model or a different subtask?
Yes. Okay. So how do we determine whether or not we can use a more expensive model or a cheaper model for a subtask? With that, what we do is we do several rounds of testing. First of all, we look at that internally as the data science team, comparing side by side what does our current model do and what does our proposed future model do. And we look at those side by side compares. Sometimes you can see pretty obviously that, hey, we have a winner here. And then if that looks good, then we take that and we do A/B testing with the nurses. So we actually will put that out and we will give 50% of the nurses one and 50% the other, and we look at the feedback that they're giving back. We also have SMEs, subject matter experts, that are available in several of our innovation hospitals who we can incorporate to say, hey, I need some special attention on some of these summaries. Can you guys go and look at the summaries for this week and put eyeballs on it and see, do we have anything? Is there anything that you would raise concerns about as you're seeing these? So we pull in all of that feedback to then be able to make a decision.
Someone's expert judgment to determine is this good or no?
Right.
Versus I need to go to the high end.
Correct. Yes.
What did adoption look like for these summaries in practice?
That's a great question. So he asked about what adoption looks like. So at the facilities that we have rolled out to, we currently have over 80% adoption across the board. So there are many of our units that are above 90% adoption, and we are still continuing to roll those out to additional facilities.
How long for the handoff? Basically, like when I say handoff, like transitioning the workers, and obviously they're not adapted to the technology as fast as the regular technology. So it's like what the difficulties that we came across in adoption.
So he asked about the difficulties with adoption. So I think one of the great things that we have at HCA is we have this cross-functional team that is embedded with each pod. So those cross-functional teams include education and change management folks to help us with this rollout process. So part of that is building educational materials. So they have references, so they have trainings. There's an in-person facilitation that happens. There are like pre-meetings that happen to say like, can you log in? Like, let's practice logging in on your phone. Can we get this far? Showing like over a week, have you logged in every day? Can you see that? This is how we can see what this is. Do you need help finding your patients? These types of things. And so that entire process of rolling that out, educating them, training, getting them off the ground takes about 8 weeks.
It's more product. Basically, you build an agent that all the patients get. That's not specific to nurse. How did you control which nurse should see each? I mean, like, how did you allocate that thing?
Oh.
Because in general, like, I can move from one patient to the other patient because like, this is a doctor thing, like, which doctor should go to the patient on this stuff.
Yes.
How did you manage that?
Yeah, so he was asking about how we managed which nurses could see which patients. Yeah, so from a security controls perspective. So what we have done is we have mirrored their Meditech access. So whatever they have access to in Meditech, whichever patients they can see there is what patients they have access to within this application.
It's more of data and it's still not system security outcomes.
Yeah. Was there another question?
Got one on this side.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes.
For the trace tool.
Mm-hmm. So we get a lot of the tracing abilities from ADK. So OpenTelemetry is a great standard, but we're able to use the OpenTelemetry pieces to send all of our logs and traces into Dynatrace, and then that's what we're using for like visualization of things. But then there's also the standard GCP tooling in the background where you can look at any of the audit logs, traces, and stuff like that. So for the A/B testing side of it, we tend to do that more directly in that we're getting the feedback. That feedback's coming through our application. We're pulling that directly in and then analyzing that as a data science team. Yeah.
I had a question about Pro versus Flash. So
yes.
Given the same context window, did you find a significant difference in hallucination rates of the two, or was it trade-off?
So we actually have very few hallucinations now that we have moved from the mega prompt down to these individual smaller LLM calls. So when we looked at Pro versus Flash, we really did not see any degradation in terms of hallucinations or omissions or any of that. But we did see a tremendous savings in costs. Yeah. Was there another question back there?
How are you obtaining feedback from the nurses? How are you getting feedback from them on what they like and don't like about the process?
Yeah, so great question. So how do we get feedback from our innovation teams? So there's a couple ways that we get that there. One, they have the ability to log into the system as a nurse to be able to see that. Again, the same access that they would have in Meditech to the patients that are in their facility. They can log in and provide feedback either through the survey at the end or in different sections to tell us that they have feedback about that. We also do design sessions. And so we've had multiple design sessions at these innovation hubs to be able to go through and understand, hey, this is what we have today. Is this working? What are your pain points? They're observing what's going on, trying to understand what works, what doesn't, what else do they want out of this, so that we can then take that feedback back and build that in, add it to our backlog. Yes. So we're tracking a number of KPIs. We have both product-related KPIs and we have some very specific data science-related KPIs. On the data science side of things, we're looking at factuality. We are looking at coverage. So how much of this are we getting? Consistency, coherence, and helpfulness. So those are our pieces that we are getting from the feedback and the evaluations that we are doing. And then from the more product side, we're looking at typical product metrics like adoption and those sorts of things, but we're also looking at the instances of safety events, and we're looking at the time spent on the handoff processes and those related activities.
So I'm just looking at the negative side of it, right? What are the loopholes that we find out behind that us may or may not put in there? Some of, like obviously when you somebody forgot to enter the system was moving on to the next time. Are you using this app to see that like what are the gaps that in the systems? Why not to not like did you ever use that?
So as far as the gaps that we can see with this, this actually is surfacing a lot of the gaps in data. So data that's not being entered by physicians, data that a nurse hasn't charted yet, which I mean, we all kind of knew that that was happening, but this gives us actual data of this is how many times this isn't happening. This is how many times a physician has written a document and not signed it yet. So we can't actually use it for anything because it's still in the draft state. So it surfaced a lot of things like that that we then are sending to other teams to be like, okay, we want better data here. How do we get that? Well, here are some of the problems. Like, yeah.
I asked about handoff versus I'm taking the data comes from the nurse, like handoff from patient from actually coming from the patient. Data that comes waiting until the last minute. So it's not until after that 6:30 time. What's the thing like later? And is this only for nurses or is this all to nurses? And
So he asked about what if the data isn't being entered until right before shift change, which nurses have a tendency to do, and what does that look like? And then is some of this falling to other like PCTs and whatnot? So the answer to your first question is if the data hasn't been entered, then we can't do anything with it. So part of this, in that nurses want more of this available at their fingertips, is okay, we want then the documentation to happen earlier. And so we're trying to remove some of the barriers at the end of the shift to make the handoff process easier so that you can document stuff earlier. If you document it earlier, then you don't have to remember to write it down or say it at handoff later because you haven't documented it yet because it's already going to be in there. So that's part of some of the process changes that we're working on with the nurses to shift some of that documentation earlier. And then as far as working with PCTs and others, currently they are not included in this. It does pull anything that is in the medical record, so anything that is documented in the system, regardless of who that came from, whether that's a physical therapist, a physician, lab results, all of that gets sucked into here, but the only ones kind of using this in the output sense at the moment are nurses.
Focused on system.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of explain the assessment. How does that face the assessment?
Yep. So currently he asked about different systems, different locations within the hospitals and how that would work. So currently we are just doing med-surg and progressive or step down units. So we are not even in ICU units yet. The ED is one thing that we are starting to tackle and is in development. But yes, there needs to be customization for the different like units and different workflows. Yes. Yes.
How are you demonstrating ROI? What people what
So the ROI is based off of some of those KPIs that I mentioned earlier. So we're looking at things like reduction in safety events, or reduction in any of the sentinel events that are happening. We're looking at time savings that are happening. So if handoffs are going long, and we're eating into that next shift because we're not able to get through everything in those 5 minutes per patient, and we can see a reduction in that time, that's another piece that we are showing in terms of ROI. And then honestly, the big one is risk reduction. So like hopefully not all the risks materialize into a negative event, but being able to show the capacity to reduce that risk is the other piece of the ROI. Yes. I will finish this slide eventually. Yes.
So since you're using smaller, like you're working with smaller tasks,
Mm-hmm.
you optimize the cost.
Yes. So what we have looked at on the cost side is we're optimizing the system as a whole. And so in some cases, we may want to break the prompts down, make more LLM calls that are smaller and more targeted, and sometimes we may want to group some pieces together. But what we're looking at from a cost perspective is really the big picture. So what does it look like if I run it this way versus I run it this way? And then we extrapolate that out. And then if we end up running something where it's going to be more expensive, then we go back to our FinOps group and say, hey, we need a bigger budget. And this is what it looks like.
For this in here for you, and I don't know how many slides, but maybe allow Megan to take a break. Presentation.
It's
I'm
okay.
glad for the conversation.
No, it's good. Okay. Let's see. I think we've hit on almost all these things. Maybe the last bullet on latency, just being able to run a whole bunch of this stuff at the same time, because we've broken down that one prompt. I've now got 8 little calls all happening simultaneously, which means those can all happen faster because I'm sending all of those calls out to Google instead of waiting for the one big thing to finish. So that has helped us speed things up, and we're looking to optimize that even further. Okay. I feel like we've already gone into a lot of details, but let me continue to go into some details here, because while we've talked a lot about LLMs so far and gotten into some of the stuff with tokens and all of that, we actually have 3 different ways that we are using agents. So we've talked a lot about what I think you would stereotypically think of with agents, in that I'm making an LLM call, I have a context, here we go. And that's what a lot of these up here do, but not all of them. So there are some things where I don't need an LLM. When I was doing one big call to get one big summary, okay, I need an LLM to do all of this. But I don't need an LLM to go pull me the latest set of vitals. That's structured data. I can pull that in. I can format that. I don't need that to be in an LLM call. So I can take that into deterministic code, pull that in. I've just reduced my costs because I'm not calling an LLM. I don't have any tokens to worry about, and I've reduced my risk because I don't have to worry about hallucinations, omissions, any of that. So that's one type of optimization that we made to make this better. The second thing we did is what I would call a hybrid approach. So this is primarily implemented in our review of the major body systems. So when you're in the hospital, nurses are going through and they're evaluating all of your different bodily systems. So what is your neurological condition? What is your gastrointestinal condition? What is your musculoskeletal condition? Lots of different checkboxes and little fields that they're checking and marking off on all of your different systems. We want to be able to surface the important information, anything that might be relevant to the next nurse about those systems. But I've got gobs of data about all these things. So what can I do? I can pull in all the structured data, because a lot of these are like checkbox fields of like yes, no for all of these different components. So I can pull in all that structured data, and then I can use an LLM on the backside just to summarize and find all of those needles in the haystack. What's the important thing that I should care about as a new nurse coming on to this patient? What is the thing that looks different? What's abnormal? Surface that out of all of this so that I don't have to write something deterministic to try to figure out what's the important stuff. This is where I need some semantic meaning about what is actually going on here to find the important pieces of like what system should we be focusing on and what is going on. Okay, so I also talked about way back when, it seems like forever ago, that we have citations that come with each of our bullets that we put in the summary. So how we do this is through what I'm calling here sub-agents. It's actually a callback function within the ADK system. So as we produce our summary bullets for every single one of those sections, we generate the bullet and we generate a citation along with that bullet. But I don't trust that citation that came from the LLM. It came from an LLM. It could be anything. I don't trust that. So instead, what I want to do is I want to write a deterministic process that says, is this citation any good? And I do 2 checks. First of all, is the citation that the LLM gave me back for this, is it actually in the source material? Is this in the EMR data somewhere? If it's not in the EMR data, then we yank out that citation right there on the fly during the generation. Okay, now second, I may have a citation that is in the EMR data, but my bullet is about the MRI imaging results, and my citation could be about blood pressure. Okay, those may be that may be a valid statement, but it has nothing to do with that bullet. And so if there is not a significant amount of overlap between the citation and the bullet, then I yank that citation out. And so then if I end up with a bullet that has 0 citations, that gets ejected too. And so all of this is happening on the fly in that generation process. So I'm generating those bullets, I'm doing these citation checks, and then editing what is that final result in that summary before sending that on to the final output to get combined and condensed and displayed on the UI. Yes. Yes, that's a great question. So she was asking if we are tracking the citation kickouts, and yes, we have monitoring in place for that. So that's back to whoever asked about where the traces and stuff go. Dynatrace dashboards to be able to pull that in so that we can take a look at, is there an uptick in what we're throwing out? Are we throwing out things that we don't want to be throwing out? Especially when we get to looking at, are there omissions? Or are we omitting things from the summary because we had to kick them out because we couldn't find good citations for them? That helps us to improve and iterate. So it's similar. We're not training any of the models. So the models that we're using are off-the-shelf Google models. But then what we do use that for is to update our prompts and the data that we're pulling in. Yes.
So the agent, is it specific to a handoff, or does it give a full summary of the patient? Like, for example, patient joined 5 days back. Obviously, there are like 5 to 6 hands-ups that are happening in different. So how does that look like? Because obviously LLM is generate a different context when you run the same prompt at different times. How do we make sure the context is safe if I'm trying to generate entire history of the patient as the last kind of, for example, after 7 times per day?
Yeah, so he's asking about generating the handoff at different points in time. So really what we're looking at here is something that is generated on the fly. So every time I generate, you're right, like I'm going to get a different version of the handoff because that is different. We do save all of the information that we have. So we save the data that we pulled in. We save the generations that came from the LLMs so that we can go back and look at that. We do actually compile a whole bunch of this stuff, a summary of our summaries into a timeline for patients that have been there for a while. But we just show the most current information to the nurse. So every time we generate a new handoff, that's what is then displayed to the nurse.
How did you make sure the accuracy is good? As we see a lot of times, like the accuracy is changing time by time. So did you go and compare the previous reports, or just to take the latest input and generate the handoff? Like I have last 6 handoffs, and this is the 7th handoff. Did we make sure, like, did we compare that to the previous results, or are we not even comparing?
So he's asking if we're comparing the current handoff to prior handoffs.
Exactly.
So there is some comparison that happens there, but that's not a great comparison of what we want to be able to show, because what we're looking at in today's handoff is the current state of the patient today. And so if I go back and look at what they had yesterday, they were at a different point in time. They had different test results pending versus not. They've had different things returned since then. Some of their information has stayed the same. Like obviously we don't want their admission date changing like after they're there. So we do compare things like that. But what we're really looking at is, are we showing the most pertinent information? Are we showing the things that changed? That's the type of stuff that we want in the summary. That's what the nurses are looking for, is what has changed, especially when you have a nurse, like the day shift nurse that comes back day after day. What has changed from the previous one to the next one? Less so about producing the same information over and over again. That's less helpful for what they're looking for.
The reason for asking, like, sample tests coming 2 different days, but are we making sure is it using the latest samples?
We got to have everybody in this conversation.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the generation side of things, but we aren't just using agents for generation. They're also powering our evaluation and deployment optimization loops. So we're also continuously improving. So I've mentioned the evaluations that we're doing and the different metrics that we're looking at here. So hallucinations, is the LLM generating something that it shouldn't? Omissions. So of course, this is a summary. It is not going to have everything in the summary that is in the medical record. It can't. It would be useless at that point. But are we omitting something that is clinically important? That has a judgment factor to it. Redundancy. Are we wasting space in this handoff by repeating the same information? Do we have inconsistencies that are showing up either within one section or across sections? And then we have one section that is about what does the nurse need to do in the next 12 hours? So these are things that may have been ordered. They are things that the physician has recommended. Those things need to be actionable if we're telling the nurse these are things that they need to do. So in that actionability section, are those things actually actionable, or are they just passive observations? So those are the different things that we're evaluating. And then we're taking all of those evaluations and we're putting that through an optimization loop where we can update and improve those prompts and then have the developers, the data scientists, the engineers take a look at that, determine what we need to improve, which of those improvements we want to accept and put into the system. How am I doing on time, Glenn?
We're good.
Okay.
No, there's 30 minutes. If you want.
Okay, all right. I don't think I need 30 minutes, unless we have lots of questions.
Probably.
Okay, so overall, I want to talk about how we can optimize the system even further, because really that's a lot of what we're doing now. So like we have this out, it's in production, but how do we keep improving it? How do we keep it growing and keep adapting to what the nurses are needing and the feedback that they're giving us? So in order to optimize the system, we have to be able to evaluate it. So I talked a little bit about this, but I want to dig in a little bit more about how we actually do this, because it's actually kind of cool. And we're working on some patents for it. So what we're doing to do this is we start at the end. We start with the evaluators. So we build the evaluators. If we can then optimize the evaluators, we can use these optimized evaluators to apply that to the generators. And then if we can apply that to the generators, we can then optimize the generators. So we're going to work backwards. I want really good evaluators. I want somebody who can really understand what is going on and what's right and what's wrong with it. And then if I build really good evaluators, I can build an even better generator at the front end that is producing my summary. Okay, so how do we actually do this? And stick with me, this gets a little bit more technical, but I think it's kind of cool. Okay, first off, we're using LLM as a judge. So I mentioned that. We're computing all these different metrics that I mentioned before using the LLMs. Then how do we actually make this better? We're going to create training and validation data for our evaluations by introducing controlled perturbations. So if you know anything about stable diffusion, it's a very similar concept to that. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to, because the LLMs are really good at hallucinating, we're going to double down on that ability. And we're going to say, I want you to mess up these summaries on purpose, but in a way that I know what you did. So we want them to remove important information, make omissions. I want you to fake some information that didn't exist in the patient record for this particular patient. I want you to duplicate stuff. We have the LLMs produce all of these different perturbations. And then we take all of these and we can now make a new set of this training and validation data where we know what's wrong with that data. Okay, but caveat, this is not the summaries that are going out to the nurses. These are the summaries that we were just using in the back end. No one panic. That's that. Okay, so we have all of these defects that we know that we have. And we can now measure this because we know that this defect is this type of defect. This is a hallucination. It's exactly here. And this is the expected effect that it should have on the metrics. So if we know that, then we can run the evaluators and say, did we get what we expect? And if we get what we expect, great. If we didn't get what we expected, well, then we know we need to fix the evaluators. So we need to fix the prompts that we're using there to do that evaluation because it's not catching something in the correct way. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do we do this? We actually use a genetic Pareto process, so the JEPA process that's here, to generate different candidates as we go through this iterative process to improve those evaluators. And then we're going to produce a Pareto frontier of a bunch of different options where some of those prompts may be better than others at different aspects. So I've got all those different metrics that I'm optimizing against. One prompt may be much better at hallucinations, and another prompt may be much better at omissions, but I want to be able to capture all my different options so that I can fiddle with everything and eventually get the best option out of all of them. So the way that we do that fiddling in a bit more technical detail, we go through and we start with the initial prompts that we have, and then we add in some additional prompts to that population. So, these may come from feedback from nurses about what's not working right. It may come from data scientists' hypotheses about what they want to change. It may come from other prompts that we're generating through this process as we go through this iteration. We're gonna mutate some of this. We're gonna make small changes. We're gonna add examples. We're gonna go from one shot to few shot. We're gonna reorder things in the prompt and see if that changes how they're working. We're gonna recombine parts of prompts that we think are working well and see if we can pull the best aspects out of different prompts and make a new prompt that's like a Frankenstein of the prior prompts that we have. And then we're gonna incorporate all the scoring information that we have about which prompts are better at which things to try to end up with, okay, I know this one's really good and it's really close. Maybe I can just tweak a couple more things into this one because that's the weakness that I want to target to improve. And then overall, I'm trying to find which are those prompts that are not dominated. So if something is clearly better in every single metric, like that's a good one. But again, I may have one that's better at some things than others. So I can use this process. I can use this process both to improve our evaluators, but also then the exact same process to improve our generators, anything that's using an LLM. Does that make sense? Cool. Yes. So we actually run the evaluation process once a week. The optimization process we run kind of at an ad hoc piece right now. So we're very much hand-holding that as it goes through. But yeah, that may change as we go forward. Okay. All right, so that's the big stuff that I have here. I'll talk a little bit about what's coming next. I think I've given you guys a few previews of this. Yes.
From concept to production, how long?
Ooh, let's see. The POC started in, I believe, January of 24, or just no earlier, or maybe in late 23. Maybe I'm looking at some HCA folks here. So it started there. I joined this project in September of 24. We were in production in mid 25 the first time. That is when we first got there. So like that's not enterprise scale yet at that point. That was just a couple facilities.
15 months, give or take, somewhere in there.
Yeah, probably around there.
Could you have done it before LLMs?
Not like this. Yeah, so could I have done this before LLMs?
Yeah.
Not in this way. So I think that's the big part that is unlocked with LLMs here is there's so much text in these medical records between all the clinical documents, all the notes that are written. That's so hard to pull out in a deterministic fashion to be able to extract that information without some sort of natural language tool. And I don't know that I could have done this with something even just like BERT. Yeah, that would have been really hard. Yeah. Okay, so we're using agents to automate all of the pieces of data. So I talked about this a little bit when you asked the question about data. Because we have multiple EHRs, because we have customizations for almost every hospital within each EHR. We can't manually map every single mnemonic for every single facility to all of these different categories to be able to pull all this stuff in. So what we're doing behind the scenes is using agents to pull out and extract that semantic meaning to be able to get at the pieces of data, because there's so much data in that medical record. How do we pull all the relevant pieces in? That is very much still a work in progress to get all the different pieces. We're pulling gobs of data in, but at this point, we still don't have everything because there's so much. So the second thing that we're currently working on is new workflows. So everything I've talked about here is about handoffs in med-surg. So med-surg to med-surg type of units. But as I mentioned, we're looking at ED to inpatient. So like that's going from one world to a completely different world. So how can we help facilitate that when you're going from one entire care team to something that's completely different? We're also looking to move this not just for nurses, even though this is nurse handoff, not just for nurses, but if we can also provide this to physicians. So hospitalists often work for a week at a time on a particular floor, and then they hand off to another hospitalist. So they have a similar problem. It's not happening on a daily basis, but it's happening once a week, and they could benefit from this type of tooling as well. So we're expanding to all these other types of clinical workflows. And last but not least, we are moving towards ambient AI. So how could we capture more of the feedback from the nurses without forcing the nurses to type things to us? So can they record their feedback to us? Can we capture some of that feedback automatically as that's being talked about in the room? Can we incorporate any of that as feedback without adding additional burden to our nurses who are already overworked and have tons of patients? So in the end, to summarize, our goal is very simple. It is every handoff at every hospital, every time, done right, but continuously improving it.
I'm guessing this is separate instances for each of the hospital EHRs for each of the hospitals, or is it one single instance and you're distributing this as a service to all those individual systems?
So he's asking if these are different instances for different hospitals or if it's one for all. So it is actually one for all. So handling all of the different data systems is done on the back end side. And then the nice part is we're down to 2 systems on the front end for the different hospitals. So we only have to integrate our nurse handoff application into 2 front end systems to be able to display that on those phones to those nurses. Yes.
You seem stressed. How big is your team?
Oh my gosh, this is not one person. So no, I have an absolutely incredible team. So how we are structured is we are actually structured in a pod system. So I have a cross-functional team. As the tech lead of the pod, all of the technical folks report up to me on this pod. So I have 5 data scientists. I have 3 AI engineers. I have 3 front-end engineers. I have a QA engineer. Make sure I'm not forgetting anybody on the engineering front. So I have all that from a technical team. We have a product owner. We have a product analyst. We have a change management. Then we have other support that is more shared services in terms of like value tracking and some of the AI engineering and platform support and cloud engineering support that are pulled in kind of as needed. But yeah, so the pod in and of itself is running about 20 people-ish, give or take. We are one of the bigger pods, but we are doing a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, we need to be bigger. But yeah, so the pod gets bigger or smaller depending on what's needed to be built.
What's been your nurse happiness / success rate overall?
So it's actually been really good. That's one of the coolest things about this is as we have deployed this, we've gotten feedback, and when we've previewed this to others, lots of other facilities are asking, so when is it coming to my facility? When do I get this?
It's not a burden for them. reducing their burden.
They like it. They like the ability to have it available in their hand. They like the ability that it's there summarized where they're not having to jot things down. I don't know if you've seen nurses do this, but like they will take a scrap piece of paper and write their notes on that. They'll take something that's supposed to go into the shred bin, turn it over and write on that and carry that around with them for several hours. They write on Post-it notes. Like it's all over the place. So this really helps from an organizational perspective. It also helps them not have to sit in front of the computer after the prior nurse went home to go and be like, what did she say? And have to go and look up every single piece there. So they really like it. The other cool part is we've had surveys. We do surveys of all like the new nurses. So there's lots of new nurses trying to get into the profession. Giving handoff is kind of intimidating, especially if you have to give it to an experienced nurse. So the scores that we've gotten on surveys on like feeling prepared to give handoff and feeling prepared to talk about your patients have increased, and that's something that just doesn't really move a lot in just normal history of this. Like we've seen those types of metrics move where nurses, new grads feel better about being prepared to care for their patients.
Job satisfaction. Not happy with the system where it's actually like better about.
So she's asking about like job satisfaction scores. I haven't seen that data. I don't know if we could tie that directly back. But yeah, that's a good question. Yes. Yes. Yeah, so we have seen reductions in Sentinel events in the facilities that we are deployed in. We have seen a material reduction. Yeah, which is like the best part of this. Yes.
Two related questions. Is there any pushback by nurses of having to use their own personal device? And what about security? Can they get on the system outside of hospital, off the hospital premises?
Good question. So she asked about using personal devices and accessing this off premises. So it's not on their personal device. I know I picked up my phone here, but the nurses within the facilities use a facility provided phone that is only, the data is only accessible while they are on the HCA network. It actually doesn't even work if you take that phone to another hospital. It doesn't work without reconfigurations of that.
I think Sam has some questions from the Zoom audience.
Oh, yeah.
Sam?
I think the room's done a pretty good job of asking the same questions, but I think a few of these. So the latest one was, what was the second best pain point / hurdle for this entire pipeline after the extraction of massive data using different agents?
What was the second biggest pain point after the data? Ooh. I mean, it's always the data first. Let's see. Second biggest pain point. Honestly, I think it's a lot of the integrations. So there's a lot of systems to integrate here in order to make this all work and make everything talk to each other. That was, I think you asked earlier about how long it took to go to production. That was one of the things that really held us up, is getting everything to talk to each other. There's a bunch of networking and security and all of these pieces that took forever to get all of those different components lined up to be able to talk to each other, because especially with the LLM side of this, nobody had deployed any of this stuff at HCA before. So we were just breaking new ground right and left. So we're just constantly kind of carving a path through things. And so that was really slow.
Gotcha.
You have another one, Sam?
Yeah. Question about, do you measure the outcomes after the handoffs?
Do we measure the outcomes after the handoffs? So we're looking at what's happening with the patients after things have transpired in the facility, if that's what they're getting at in terms of like sentinel events and those types of things. Once the nurse handoff is in place, we're looking at pre-nurse handoff, post-nurse handoff. What was the change? So if that's what they're asking, yes. If not, ask the question again.
We got a yes.
Okay.
One more.
Okay, go ahead, Glenn.
do you do any local first data store in the mobile app so a nurse still has their summary if the central system goes down?
Ooh, good question. So I asked about anything that we're doing locally on the phones, so they still have access if the system goes down. Not currently, no. So we do not have that cached locally on their devices at this point. We have talked about different ways to handle some of the stuff on the devices, mainly because actually, believe it or not, Wi-Fi in the facilities isn't always the greatest. And so what do you do if we don't have good Wi-Fi at that point? How do you triage that? So I think when some people were asking about adoption metrics earlier, that's part of the hurdles that we're going through. Like HCA is in the process of still upgrading a lot of the Wi-Fi pieces, but until that works, there are some rooms in some facilities that don't have great Wi-Fi, and so then what do you do when like you can't get the signal there? So that is something we've talked about, different ways to handle that, but nothing is in place yet. That's a good question. Yeah. Yes.
In a equation perspective, do you have standards like that's part of the process? You're going to come to standard systems.
So as far as the standards for how we integrate the data sets, we do have a data team that we are working with who is trying to provide us with some of that data in a standardized, normalized fashion. They are also still a work in progress. They are their own pod that is working on things. So they are doing some of that, and we like to use the things that they're able to produce. But at the same token, by the same token, we have to still get data that they haven't gotten to yet. So we're doing a little bit of both right now. Yes. It's okay. Sure. Okay. So she was asking about how we keep the information confidential. So first of all, there is how we control the access to who sees what. So the nurses have access in nurse handoff to the same patients they have access in the medical record systems. So we're not giving them any information that they don't already have access to. Then on the backside, how are things stored? So we're storing things in a secure fashion, storing them according to the policies for how you can keep PHI. And so then those are accessed on a like need to access basis. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
So I don't remember if you use this term or not, but it seems like your pod is kind of an incubator within HCA. Is that a term that I thought you used, or?
So there is an incubation team, and this particular piece actually came out of work that the incubation team was doing, and they handed it over to a delivery team to then productionalize it. So they actually worked hand in hand with Google to develop the initial prototype of how this came about. And then that's where they came up with the one big mega prompt, and we had this, so we proved that we had something functional that nurses liked. Then we had to figure out how do we actually make this scalable and something that I can do for real and quick.
But on the execution side, you weren't necessarily working with Google, and where I was going with that, it seemed like an interesting concept, just having those teams. And so is HCA's thought that they would productize this? I mean, there's clearly an ROI for HCA, but would you take it to market eventually, or is that a Google thing?
It probably wouldn't be a Google thing because it is HCA IP.
Yeah.
But as far as whether or not they take it to market, I think part of it would be hard to do because so much of this depends on the data. And so if your data is structured differently, then how that comes in, you're going to need to adjust the prompts. So you can do some of it. And honestly, like Google has put out like some agents that try to replicate pieces of this for the parts that I think are reproducible. But a lot of this is so bespoke to HCA's data and how it comes across and how that's stored and then how we inject it into the systems on the back end. I think it would be hard.
Sam has his hand in the air. I think there might be one more, or
Yeah.
maybe already been answered.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
So question, did you fine tune the foundation model separately for each hospital?
So we have not fine tuned the foundation models at all. So we are still using Gemini off the shelf. The reason that we are doing that is these models are changing all the freaking time. The amount of money and time that it would take to fine tune these models and then do them again and again and again, at the pace that these are coming out, it's not worth it. We can wait a couple months and then just use the next model that comes available, assuming that it's better in the A/B testing. So in the long term, do I see fine tuning as something that we could do? Sure, but it's got to be after we've hopefully eventually maybe reach a plateau there where these models aren't coming out every 6 months and we have these new major advances. As long as that keeps happening, that it's not worth it from a time perspective and what we're trying to do. So it's at least once a year we're changing the models so far. Part of this is because we're using the models that Google has. They're deprecating their models pretty quickly. Like they're adding new models and they're deprecating their old ones. So like we've got to keep moving forward. And that's where then we have to determine, are we, the Gemini models have a pro version, a Flash Lite. Which version of the model do we need to use? How do we get the quality that we need without blowing the budgets? What happens if we need to move to a model and it's much more expensive? How do we do that? We still evaluate that every single year. Well, even within the year while those come out. Yeah.
So for agents that are spending a lot more, like one of those solutions, are you guys just focusing on only optimizing the prompts, or are you also trying to influence how the data is stored? Like, have you made decisions to change that?
So good question. So he asked if we're only optimizing the prompts or if we're also impacting how the data is stored. So we are trying to address both sides. So obviously we have a lot more control over the prompts. We do have some control over the data. Like once the data comes in, we can massage the data in certain ways. We're also working with our data team on, hey, we need this. We like this piece of information isn't coming in the HL7 messages. How do I get that added here? Or this isn't standardized and I don't know what these codes mean for this particular set of fields here. How do we get that mapped so that the LLM can ingest those codes? Because I don't know what these codes mean until you guys have mapped this stuff for me. So there's a little bit of both in that. It's very much a work in progress. Yeah.
So when it comes to a pod, you mentioned that people from product, the engineers and data. How do you guys decide what problem to solve? This is a significant problem that to solve. So how's that decision?
Excellent question. So he asked, how do we decide what problem to solve? So at a big picture level, we have a steering committee that's deciding which types of products we are building. And so then within a particular product, so this product is Nurse Handoff, our product owner is the one who is making those decisions in conjunction with some of the other leadership about what direction things need to go. So what do we need to address next? If we've got multiple pieces of feedback from nurses, which things do we want to address? Which things are going to go in the backlog and we might get to later? Which things are we going to say, well, nice idea, but no, we're not going to do that. She's the one who's primarily making those decisions on a sprint by sprint basis. Yeah.
Did your incubation team have a cool handoff app to hand over
He asked if there was a cool app to hand that we did hand off from the incubation team. I wish that would have been a nice pun. Okay, I saw others. Yeah. We have not. So this is not implemented in the UK at this point. So to go to the UK, that opens a whole other can of worms with GDPR. So that is on hold, and that will involve lots of legal. So no, we haven't gotten there yet. Yes. Yeah, so he asked if we notice changes in the evaluations as we change models, and the answer is yes. And we also know that as we change models, we're going to have to re-optimize prompts. So part of that is comparing, at the outset, can I just take my current prompt and compare it with the model I'm using right now and the new model and look at those side by side? Sometimes that's enough to be like, yep, this new model is a winner. Sometimes it's not, and it's not clear because, to your point, we need to optimize for the individual models with exactly what they're expecting. And so then we need to do more work in doing that comparison to really do a good test of, should we be using the new model, we've got to go through that optimization process on those prompts to make them optimized for, Gemini 3.5 Flash versus Gemini 3.1 Flash Lite versus 2.5 Flash versus yada, yada, yada.
Have one variable that's fixed, or sorry, fixed. Modify the models. Is that whole chemical process actually not fixed? That's the prompts. That's the outcomes you want, or is it?
So it's not a fully automated process. So we still do have developers in the loop who are looking at the things and making changes, adding pieces to it, watching what comes out, saying, okay, well, I saw this. Yes, we got these things here, but I also want to inject some other pieces here. So it's not entirely automated, but yes, we've automated lots of pieces of it, but we're still very much in that like white glove support piece of like, let's make sure that this is all going the way that we want it. We may still be fine tuning things on the side.